Patatas Origin TV.
Good evening, Patatas friend. Halloween is upon us, and I wanted to share four of my personal scary experiences from my childhood. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The fire escape. I was in early elementary school, this time in the 80s. My school was a smaller Chinese school in the heart of the Chinese community in Santa Cruz, Manila. It's not particularly huge and only has 5 floors or so and a covered rooftop gymnasium. An in-building fire escape runs down along one side that exits to the main floor and out. The door on the main floor of this exit cannot readily be accessed from the outside, so it is pretty much shut unless you're exiting from the inside. One time, a couple of my friends and I were playing on this big hallway where the library entrance is. The hallway is lit on one end where the stairs are, but it's pretty dark on the other end where the fire escape door is. Being rambunctious boys, we dared each other to go and enter the fire escape. Before this, we only went through it once during a fire drill. It was creepy as hell. It was dimly lit and the usually metal grill steps looked dank and dark. There were exhaust fans on a couple of floors, but they're generally not in use. Determined not to be called a coward, we all went with apprehension. Right in front of the door, we gazed up on it and gathered our courage. Psyching and egging each other, we finally went inside. Alan led the pack. I was in the middle, and Peter at the rear, who held the door open while we peered down the gritty, dark grills. Peter got curious and let go of the door to look as well. The moment he let go, the door slammed shut. Bam! We looked back at him at the sound of it, and at that moment, we heard a noise from somewhere. It sounded like a scream. I had goosebumps, and that creepy feeling when the hair on your neck stands. We all rushed to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air seemingly got colder, and a clunk sounded. One of the fans on the lower floor started to turn, and it got faster and faster. It felt like it's sucking us down. We're at the verge of tears and screaming for help as we try with all our might to push the door open. Then all of a sudden, the door opened and we got out. Panting, almost crying, we all hurried back to the classroom. We didn't know what happened and couldn't make sense of it all, but we were aware the building was haunted. Never again did we ever come near that door, nor played in that dark space of the hallway. Sleep paralysis or something else. I was a young school-age boy who loved watching scary movies, mostly because there were quote-unquote exposure scenes. But that's another story. One night, after watching a lovely scary movie, I got ready for bed and I chose to sleep in a folding cot because I usually leave my radio on right under it as I fall asleep to the radio music. We slept in one big room, my grandparents, my two uncles, and my aunt, who is also my surrogate mom. During this time, though, we have bought another house, and now it's only my aunt and I who are left in the old house. The old house has a store on the main floor, and my school is near this old house. Hence, my aunt and I stayed. My aunt is in the big bed, and right beside it, I have my folding cot. We fell asleep with no issues. Sometime in the middle of the night, my mind woke up, but I couldn't move. It felt like someone or something was holding me down. I opened my eyes and there was nothing but darkness. I started feeling afraid. I can hear my aunt lightly snoring and I tried to yell, but nothing came out. I started praying and repeated Hail Marys and the Lord's Prayer. Still nothing. At this time, my eyes was already starting to adjust and see in the dark. Just when I started to see, I closed my eyes tight and decided I didn't want to see what I might see. While reciting the Lord's Prayer in my head, I was also thinking, I did not want to die like this. My mind was racing with what could this be. Eventually, I focused on just moving my hand, and after some time, I moved my right hand. It was crampy, then the rest of my body followed. I was panting at the end of it. I wanted to wake up my aunt, but when I looked at the time, it was around 3 to 4 a.m. I was still scared and didn't know what happened, so just covered myself with my blanket until I fell back to sleep. Now that I'm older, I found out about sleep paralysis and the stories that come behind it. Supposedly, it's not a supernatural phenomenon, but rather a natural one, and it's somewhat a glitch in our brain that occurs every now and then. A glitch where you're unable to move your body, unable to make any sound, with the feeling that something is holding you down, but your mind is fully awake. I suppose this was what happened back then, but it was a truly terrifying experience. The Shadow. When I was in college, I liked to hang about with other second coursers. We were a few years older and called second coursers because we have finished a 4-year degree prior to taking this one. The university we were at is almost 100 years old at the time I was studying there. The quality and craftsmanship of old is quite awesome, as even though there are creaks here and there, The building was still relatively in amazing condition. One time, we oldies were hanging out and just passing time after school in one of the classrooms, chatting about random stuff, talking about assignments, homework, and other school stuff, including gossip. I was the only guy in the group, and though I don't care much for gossip, to be honest, it was amusing listening to them. At the time, one of our friends had a third eye open. She hasn't told us at this point about it, but after a while of chatting, she's persuaded us to move elsewhere. We moved to a different room and continued on. At about this time, the school ground is mostly empty, especially the building near we're in, but it's still relatively bright out, and so there wasn't really anything creepy going on. Chris, the girl with the third eye, started feeling uncomfortable again, and she said we should disband and go home. We didn't understand because we had no curfew and were practically adults in our 20s. She insisted. We relented, and the moment we got out of that room, she explained that there was a black shadow perched on one of our friends. The shadow luckily stayed behind, and that friend whom the shadow perched on later said she noticeably felt lighter after we left the room. Chris later explained she insisted we leave because she was sensing a really negative aura coming from the entity. She's no control over her third eye, but she can generally feel if what she sees has bad intentions. She sees a lot of these moving about in the school, but they are mostly harmless. The ball in the Bodega. This happened in Baguio when a group of us delegates from our university went there for a computer conference sometime in the 90s. I was in my teens. Instead of staying in a hotel, we stayed in a place that seemed more like a retreat resort. There were two big rooms on the second floor of the building, separated by another room that functions as a storage room. One big room was for the girls, and the other was for the guys. The storage room is a pass-through between the two big rooms. All of us had bunk beds. This will be our home for the next 3 days and 2 nights. We were not allowed to go to the girls' room unsupervised, but what were they thinking having this pass-through room to the girls' quarters? Two of the girls from another university were more quote-unquote liberated than the others in the way they dressed and were quite popular with the boys. During the last night of our stay, one of the guys had an idea to share scary stories with each other. The girls agreed if we did it in their room, and it was no problem since there was this pass-through bodega or storage room in between. The adults will never know. The night came, and it was around past 9 p.m. when us boys marched through the storage room to the girls' room. Lights turned down and only flashlights on. We all made a circle and took turns telling spooky stories. We started with awkward stories and then proceeded to the good stuff once people felt settled. Stories and legends, including within the area, was shared. It was extra spooky because the place we stayed at was right near the famously haunted Lawakan Road. About an hour has passed, and we heard a noise from the bodega. It sounded like a knock. We all stopped and shushed and thought maybe the supervisors were onto us. There was a feeling of chill, but we all thought we're just afraid of getting busted. A minute of silence, and no sound occurred. We decided to continue, but one of the girls seemed uncomfortable. After some time, we heard another noise, and the girl said we should stop. She said she can feel something really unpleasant, and the fact that we were telling ghost stories while in a circle is attracting it. We all decided to call it a night, since it's already about midnight, and the boys went back to our room. We in the boys' quarters settled, and sometime in the middle of the night, I clearly heard the sound of a ball bouncing on the floor, as if being dribbled slowly. Thump, thump, thump. I covered my head and closed my eyes and prayed till I fell asleep. In the morning, everyone was looking rather tired as we packed our things for the long bus ride back to Manila. Someone eventually asked during breakfast if anybody else heard the ball, and all of us said yes. The next stories are not of mine, and you will find the sources in the description below. Ghost Bro. My house was built in 1904. It is a single family home, wood frame setting on a concrete block foundation. I have been living here for about 12 years. Of all the weird things that my siblings and me have seen or heard in this house, this one event is my favorite. This happened to my brother about 10 years ago. My brother and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music, but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, and they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed, because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement. But the tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall into the living room, and out into the front porch. Everyone was outside, sitting in my brother's truck, waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now the basement is not clean, with full sight lines. There had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he is about to retrieve his food container, when out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. It is a shadowy figure, right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you are in the presence of a spirit or ghost, and that you felt a bad vibe, to say quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, fuck you. I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily, the door was open and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. Still holding his food container in one hand, he jogged down to the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, essentially having a large front yard, but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend-laden truck, he kind of smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seatbelt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean?" "He went to work early tonight. He's already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked, "So then, who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" The Shadow. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and the living room on one side, then a bathroom with two entrances. On the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows in one side and two bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser and I just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it. 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape. But the scribbles moved like electricity, arching. That's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. Just like, what the F? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around. It just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it just fucking came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the fuck outside into the daylight and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural. But I know I saw something. I don't know what it was. I hope you enjoyed those stories. I would love to hear your own personal stories. Share them in the comments below or write me an email at ofpotatomushroom@gmail.com. And as usual, please like, share, and subscribe to support this channel. Happy Halloween! I shall see you in the next haunt.